Hello everyone and welcome to the first video in our Adobe Animate journey. So I'm going to cover the complete basics of this software. If you haven't already downloaded it, then you can get it in the Creative Cloud and you should have it for free within the university. And let's get started. So let's start right from the beginning. I'm going to go to File and New, or Control N on the keyboard to start a new document. And we're going to select our full HD. Now most monitors are at 1080p full HD, so we're going to keep it at full HD. If you want it as a square aspect ratio, then you can go ahead and type 1080 in both the width and the height. The frame rate might be at 30 by default, which is the American frame rate. Here we use PAL, which is 24 frames per second, so you can change this to 24. And then just go ahead and click create. Okay, so the blank canvas here is currently set to 100%. If you want to see the canvas and the border around it, then we can select here and select the fit in window. Okay, so now I can see the entire canvas. And I'll go through some of these tools. So the first tool we have here is the new brush to Animate 2021 Fluid Brush Tool. Okay, so it's very similar to the classic brush tool, but it is a little bit more fluid. We can go from thick to thin. I'm currently using a Cintiq. I definitely recommend that you use a tablet. You can use a mouse, that's fine. In fact, here's the results with a mouse, but it just means that you'll need to go into the settings here and change the size and the stabilizer and the smoothing if you're going to use a mouse. But yeah, I definitely recommend using a tablet or a Cintiq. Okay, so again we can change some of the settings here. We've got the curve smoothing, so that's going to smooth each curve. Very nice. And here we have our classic brush. I'm just going to undo this. To undo, we can press Control Z on the keyboard or Control Z, and this is our classic brush. Okay, much the same as the other one. We've got a little bit less options here to work with. We can change the brush size right here, or we can press the bracket keys on the keyboard. These are the bracket keys. So this is going to decrease, and this one is going to increase. Okay. Now to delete this, we can go up here to the free transform tool. We can select everything that we've just drawn, and then we can press delete on the keyboard. Okay, so let's go back to our standard brush. We then have our pencil tool, which is great for sketching. And here, let's just turn our color. So here we've got a orange stroke color here. Let's just change this back to black. And here we've got our different styles. Okay, we can go through some of these. Very cool. We can also go into our pen options and change the smoothing if we need to. But for now, I'm just going to keep this as the standard line art. We've also got some shapes. So we've got the rectangular tool. We've got the ellipse or circle tool. And we've got our poly star tool. Okay. We've also got a line tool, and we can change the stroke size here if we need to make it thicker. And this is great if you're making a little ground plane here and it snaps along the axes so we can get it dead straight. We've also got our text box. Okay, we can type here. And again, we can change all of our settings on the right. And let's go ahead and delete all of this again. So we can just select all of this and press delete. Okay, again with that marquee tool here. For example, if I create a little ellipse or a circle, I can also use this lasso tool. Now by default, it might be set to the polygonal tool, so you can hold down anywhere where there's a little arrow next to this lasso tool or polygonal tool. We can just hold this down and select each one. So I've got this set to lasso, and that allows me to make a selection, and then I can delete it. Okay, or I can make a selection, go to the move tool and move this. Okay, so we can just make our selections and delete them. Okay. We've also got our eraser tool, which I'm sure you know what that does. It erases. There we go. But the eraser is good for little details. If you wanted just to remove everything, again, just go to that marquee tool and delete it. We've also got our bucket, photo bucket, so we can draw something and fill it in. So let's change the color here. Let's change this to blue, and we can fill this in. And there are other settings within the paint bucket. So for example, if I make a mark, I'm just going to set this back to black. And let's say I do these eyes here, and we can see this one is only just joining and this one isn't joining. If I go into the photo bucket, we've also got some of these close gaps options. So if I say don't close gaps, which I believe is the default option, then we can change this color. So let's change this to a yellow. And if I do that, then it's going to fill the entire object. I'm sure you've used Microsoft Paint. It does the exact same thing. I remember as a kid constantly trying to close these gaps so it didn't paint the entire thing. But what we can do here is we can select this option and we can select close small gap. So if it's a small gap, it will fill it. So that wasn't a small gap, so we need to change this to something like a medium gap. Okay, so it's classing itself as a large gap. And there we go. Now it's going to fill it in with that gap. Again, we can just go ahead and delete all of this. And we'll get into some of the other options in a later video. Up here, again, we can change our size so we can zoom in or out. We can press the Enter key on the keyboard and middle mouse to pan around. And we can also use the scroll wheel to scroll up or down, but we've also got these little bars here. So I'm going to set this back to fit to window. And let's get started. So we've got our keyframes here. And if you hold Shift on the keyboard, then we should be able to, yeah, there we go, move across. So we can use this bar here, and we can also make our new keyframe. So for example, I've started with the first keyframe, which is called layer 1, and I can move this over to 20, so select the 20th keyframe. I can then right click and select Insert Frame. Okay, so the insert frame is going to start our frame from 1 to 20 frames. If you right click here, it says insert frame, which is F5. Now it's good to remember these, where we've got insert frame, F5, insert keyframe, which is F6, and insert a blank keyframe, which is F7. Okay, so here, if we start with a blank drawing, so let's go back to our line tool here, and let's just create our first line. So it's going to be our ground plane here, and I can just name this ground. So I can just double click on that layer and name it ground. Okay, so we're going to create a new layer, so select new layer, and that's created a new layer with 20 frames. And we can start with our first drawing. Now, it's good to learn the keyboard shortcuts from the get-go. And again, that F6 creates the new frames, whereas F7 creates our new keyframe, and F8 creates our new blank frame. Okay. Or sorry, F6 is the keyframe, and F7 is the blank keyframes. Okay. So, let's go back to the beginning. Let's create our first drawing. So in this case, I'm just going to start with a ball here, like so. And let's just change the size here. Let's change this to about 16. There we go. And to move forward a frame, we're going to go ahead in 2 frames. So we can just use the, it's the comma key or the plus, sorry, it's the comma key or the full stop. So we've got comma, full stop. So that's going to go forward, and then that's going to go backwards through the frames. Okay, so if I press full stop once, we can see this moves over once. Press full stop again, and it's moved over again. Now if I press F7, then it creates a new blank frame. I can then go over here and look at the onion skin option so I can see my last drawing, and then I can go ahead and do my next drawing. So let's say, for example, this ball springs down, it gets pushed down and then comes back up and then comes back down again. So the next frame, it's going to be slightly more squished. And take your time with this. I'm just going to do this very quickly just to demonstrate this. But because it's going to be squished, it's also going to be pulled out more. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to press the full stop once, twice, and then press F7 again. And just get used to that. Get used to just pressing the full stop twice, or how many other frames you need to add, and then press F7 to add the new keyframe. Okay, so now it's going to be squished even more. I've pressed full stop twice. I can press F7. And it's going to get really squished. Let's make it about the same size here. Head twice, and we can see it starting to move over. And we will then pause here, and it's just going to come back up slightly. 2 frames. Back up a little bit. And then 2 frames, F7, and then this time it's going to spring back up. And let's make it spring back up from the ground here. Let's make sure that it is the same size as the original ball here. We can also see I've just created a little mark here, so I can use that eraser. Go back to my brush. So full stop twice, F7. And now this ball's going to come up. Again, ahead twice. And now there's less frames. Twice again. And I'm just going a little bit above it. Can go up again, just a little bit above it again. And I'm just constantly going above the 2 frames here. Let's make it come down a little bit. Ooh, and then even more. And we can see now we've gone ahead of this ground plane. So I'm going to select my ground plane here. I'm going to hold shift and then select the last frame, then hold shift again, and we can see there's this little arrow here, and that will allow us to stretch this out. So I'm just going to stretch this out to about 40 just in case. So I'm going to go back to that new frame that I just created, and let's bring this down like so. Next 2 frames, F7. Let's make it just hit the ground at this point. Over again. It might just get a little bit squished here. Over again. And back up. It's just going to do a little bounce. So again, let's just push this all the way out just in case. So back to that frame. It's coming down now. And there we go. So let's keep it at that. And here we can repeat this animation here. So we can select a loop, and then we just drag this out to where we want it to loop. So let's make it stop there. Let's go right back to the beginning. turn the onion skin off, and then let's press play. Okay. So if you wanted to speed this up, we can select the first frame and then hold shift and select the last frame. Hold shift again and we can see this little arrow, and instead of dragging it out, we're going to drag this one back in. So let's drag this to about 25 frames. Let's go back to the beginning and select this loop and bring this back to the 25 frame mark and then press play. There we go. So now it's a bit quicker. Awesome. So let's try something else. Let's just delete this animation and let's create a new layer. I'm going to call this one guide. And we're going to have an animation where the ball would follow this guideline here. So it's going to drop, it's going to bounce. It won't meet the same high point here, so it's going to fall off slightly. It's going to bounce, come down, bounce, and then roll. Okay. Now, it's good to plot these lines. So as opposed to just drawing the ball and guessing where it's going to bounce, actually draw its line of action. So where is it going to bounce within each frame? We can also mark exactly where we're going to add each frame. So for example, we've got 2 frames here, a frame here. It then gets much faster. It will then get squashed here. And then it will slow down here. And it's just starting to slow down. It's going to get faster again. And we can plot it this way. So now we know that we need 2 frames here, another frame, all the way down here, another frame. It's going to get squished and come back up. And this animation might be around here instead of there. And then back up here, animation, it's going to be slower, come back down very quickly. We might need to remove a frame here, but we'll have a look at that. And then up, and it's going to slow down. Okay, so let's try that. Let's have a look and see what this looks like. Now, I've just noticed that this actually wasn't drawn on the first frame. So let's just select this first frame and move this back. Okay, so we just need to double click on this line and drag it backwards. And then let's create a new layer. Okay, so create a new layer. I'm going to call this one ball. And let's start drawing on this first layer. So I'm going to lock these just in case I start to animate on the wrong layer. So I've locked the guide and the ground plane. We can also go back to that guide, and here on the right hand side where it says frame, we can select the color effects, select brightness, and just increase this brightness a little bit just so we can't see it as much. Okay, and then go back to ball, and then we can start animating. Okay, so first frame, I'm going to draw first ball. And if you want to be really precise, you could use the ellipse tool. For now, I'm just going to use freehand. So we start with our first frame. We're going to go ahead 2. So full stop, and then press F7 as our new keyframe. And again, we're going to turn on this onion skin just so we can see our last frame. Oh, let's go back to my pencil brush. So let's draw our next one. I cannot draw circles. I need some practice. So we've got our first 2 frames. It's going to very slowly ease in and then get much quicker. So 2 frames ahead, F7. Two frames ahead, F7. This time it's going to fall much quicker this time. There we go. Full stop, F7. And this one's just going to hit the floor here, so it's going to be a little bit squashed. Just moving ahead 2 frames. And then it's going to jump up and it's going to be a little bit elongated here and stretched. So at this point we'll make it a little bit more circular. Let's try and get it circular. Here we go. So 2 full stops and F7. And we can have it so that this actually pivots a little bit. So let's make it a little bit more pronounced on this side. Full stop, F7. Right, we'll get there. Here we go. Let's do another one right here, and it seems to be getting smaller, so let's make that a little bit bigger. So make sure you're getting them the same size. I'm just being very quick here. You do want to take your time with this. And I might just have another frame here. Let it hit the ground. Could even have it just roll off the side here. Magically seems to be getting smaller again. And then let's draw it out of the frame. So let's go back to the beginning. I've got my loop still turned on, so let's just bring this out. Let's turn off onion skinning, and I can also turn off this guide. There's a little eye icon here just so I can make that disappear. We can see that being thrown out of the air. It bounces and then rolls off the side. Okay, so we can turn our guide back on. So these guides are really helpful. Make sure you're drawing these guides as you're doing your animation. And that just about covers the basics for this lesson. So give it a whirl. Draw a character if you want. You don't have to do a ball, or you could have a character just moving around in 3D space. Give it a go. Try out these tools and have some fun. Okay, I'll see you in the next video. Take care for now. Goodbye.